There was just an important election in Chile, and bad news. A leftist Gabriel Boric, quote, a former student protest leader, defeated the sort of Trumpster candidate, Jose Antonio Cast. And why this is bad is it means that Chile is now going to be moving in the socialist direction. Chile, by the way, has had enormous success under free market policies. It's one of the most affluent countries in South America. Milton Friedman and the so-called Friedmanites went down there, going back, this is, I think, to the 1970s, installed a kind of Chilean retirement system, guided the country in establishing free market policies, which have paid huge dividends. And so we have really here a paradox. Why would people who have experienced the success of free market policies turn around and vote against them? Is it not the case that in doing this, they're going to be getting what they deserve? Now, I just read an article in American Greatness. It's by a fellow I know, a very interesting, although somewhat grumpy political scientist. His name is Paul Gottfried. And this article is slightly a slight chastisement of my own views. So that's why I find it particularly intriguing. I want to get into it. So Paul Gottfried basically says that, listen, conservatives often say that people who live in a mess, in blue states, for example, or in inner cities, had nothing to do with creating it. He says conservatives often talk about, quote, blacks living on, quote, democratic plantations. And this could be a direct allusion to my work, because I talk this way. And then he also says, I hear conservatives talking about how terrible it is that in Germany and Australia, they're arresting people on the street. There are these terrible lockdowns. And Gottfried then slyly says, well, how do we get these situations? And he goes, the simple answer is people vote for them. People vote in Democrats in these cities. The Australians and the Germans have voted for left-wing regimes that have imposed lockdowns. Germany, in fact, had a moderately conservative regime, Angela Merkel, but now the Greens have been winning victories. And the Social Democrat Party has been winning. And so they're moving further in the direction of the left. And then, of course, we have Chile. Paul Gottfried talks about de Blasio. He says, I keep reading about Comrade de Blasio. He goes, wait a minute. This guy won his second term as New York City's mayor with 65% of the vote. Gottfried points to Kim Klacik, the young African-American who ran against Kwesi Mfume. Now, Kwesi Mfume is a thug. He's corrupt. He's been the longtime incumbent in Maryland's 7th District. And Klacik ran a tough campaign. More police protection, more tax breaks, entrepreneurial zones in the inner city. Well, guess who won? Mfume won, and won decisively, 30 to 40-point margin. So Gottfried's point is that politicians like Mfume, Lori Lightfoot, Maxine Waters, Gavin Newsom, Bill de Blasio, he goes, it's not like people don't have a chance to vote them out. Larry Elder ran in the recall against Newsom. Who won? Newsom won. And so I guess what Gottfried's point is that the people who live on these plantations want to live there. And I guess what he's saying is they deserve it. They're voting for this. The truth of it is they'll probably keep voting for it. And then he asks an interesting question, which is, why do they do that? If it's somehow not in their long-term interest, it's not in their economic interest, not in their material interest, why would people behave that way? And his answer is that people vote less based upon direct economic interests and more based upon conjured up fears of something that they fear or hate. Now, Gottfried's point is that who do blacks really hate? Well, they hate white supremacy. And who's portrayed as the white supremacist? Well, the Republicans, Trump. So even though Trump increased his share of the black vote, says Gottfried, he still didn't get close to the majority of the black vote because he was the candidate tagged with white supremacy. It's what he represented that mattered, and not any, I've improved the black unemployment rate. Well, I've delivered all these benefits. And Gottfried says, it doesn't matter. He goes, why are the Germans acting the way they are? It seems irrational. Why would they vote for further lockdowns? His answer is, what the Germans are afraid of is the specter of fascism. And the left has grabbed onto the label of anti-fascism, and so they tap into German guilt, and the Germans argue, if anything is tagged fascist, we can't possibly be associated with it. We've got to go the other way. So essentially, Gottfried concludes that these voters are, quote, getting exactly what they deserve. Now, I think that conclusion is a little bit harsh because there are people who vote for things and they don't know. They don't know better. The Venezuelans who voted in Hugo Chavez the first time didn't know what they were getting. So they didn't get what they deserve, but they did get what they voted for. They voted for Chavez and they got Chavez. So I think that Gottfried's theory applies if people keep doing it. Now, the problem with Venezuela is once Chavez installed himself, he was able to rig the system, and so you don't have subsequent free elections in Venezuela. But it is true in a democratic system where there are free elections and people keep choosing the bad guys. In that case, they're getting not just what they voted for, they are getting what they deserve.